When it comes to composing music, a lot of factors come into play, but nothing is more challenging than creating a track that accompanies an epic experience. My name is Codiak, and today, with the help of a special guest, we'll break down some of the music from Hytale. We've got a special treat this week because Hytale's composer Oscar Garvin released 3 new tracks along with some brief thoughts about each piece of music. For anyone who's curious, Oscar composes everything using a MIDI keyboard, which functions the same way as a regular keyboard, but allows the composer to record the keystrokes directly into some recording software. Oscar can then use what is known as instrument libraries to overlay the sounds of thousands of instruments directly onto that MIDI data, all at the push of a button. He can change notes directly in the software and change which instruments play what track with a few clicks of the mouse. What used to take a full orchestra, dozens of microphones, and tens of thousands of dollars to create can now all be done in the comfort of a small room. But while the technology is convenient, composers are still challenged to stir emotion with their music. So without further delay, let's take a look at the tracks. The team has been releasing a lot of information about Zone 1, and in that vein, we get our first taste of some music that will go along with the player's experience. For those of you who haven't had a chance to listen, let's play a short sample of the track. I want to bring in my good friend and professor of music theory at Wake Forest University, Dave Geary, to talk briefly about some of the elements of this first track.
Composer Oscar himself notes that one of his goals for a new adventure is to write a sense of adventure into the sounds themselves. And I think he does this very successfully through a number of different ways. For me personally, I find one of the most compelling compositional tools used is a changing sense of key and harmony. A fitting analogy for video game music is that you can think of melodies as being individual characters, and you can think of key and harmony as being the broader environment in which those characters are situated. So this track is successful in the sense that it uses a fluctuating musical environment with much more regularity than you would find in classical or popular music.
Now our next piece of music is called Quebeck Village, and the Hytale world is going nuts about this track. Quebecks have already become a fan favorite and are one of the factions players are chomping at the bit to learn more about. Let's take a quick listen to some of the track. Because the piece is directly tied to a faction, Oscar had the challenge of creating music that players could associate to a thing, in this case, the Quebecks. Oftentimes, composers will link important characters to themes. I think you'll all recognize this iconic music tied to a particular Sith Lord. Once again, I bring in Dave to explain his thoughts on the music.
You know, a number of musicians have convincingly made the argument that certain sounds have an inherent connection to various extra musical objects and sensations. In addition to the Star Wars example you just heard, another classic is that the low strings used in the Jaws theme have a natural tendency to be linked to things such as fear and danger. In this instance, the Quebecks being represented by a high-pitched and airy flute, as well as plucked string instruments, is a natural connection between sound and character, aimed at depicting the playful, whimsical nature of the character.
Our final piece of new music takes players in a completely different direction, and in fact, a different zone. Oscar shares a piece titled Gaia's Lament, and I think we can all agree that there is something completely different going on here. There are two noticeable features of this piece, instrumentation and space. Oscar explains that he began experimenting with space to create a sense of a vast, lonely environment. It required some restraint, stretching material out over time, and literally leaving open spaces in the music. Now that sense of openness is matched by a change in instrumentation. We hear layers of strings working in harmony, all while various percussion instruments fade in and out of focus. Oscar also used woodwind instruments like flutes and oboes to create a contrasting melody. I want to bring in Dave one last time to talk about this piece of music.
As Cody mentioned, there's a long-standing tradition for lush, sustained, and slow-moving string parts to represent extra musical topics such as spaciousness and hollowness and loneliness. Another aspect of this composition is also a bit of a musical trope for representing those same features, which is the use of what's called a pedal tone. If you listen again to the excerpt, you may hear that while some of the top string parts are moving very slowly, the lowest string part for most of the track actually sustains a single note. And this is a technique that's been used throughout music history to represent laments and other topics.
As you can see, there is a lot that goes into creating music for a game like Hytale. Oscar is faced with a number of challenges that he must think about when composing each track. With such an ambitious project, Oscar has a lot to compose, and I have no doubt that we'll end up with somewhere over 100 music tracks to accompany our journey on Orbis. I want to thank Professor Dave Geary for sharing his insight with our community, and as always, open up the floor to you guys. Let us know what you think about each of these tracks in the comments section below, and remember, you can always join the Game Gurus on Discord if you want to keep the conversation going after the video is over. My name is Codiak, and from everyone here at the Game Gurus, thanks for watching, and play on.